road is a line. That is the one thing you can count on. You start at one end, you drive, and every mile you put behind you is a mile you do not have to see again. So when I picked up the same hitchhiker for the 4th time in one night on a road with no loop in it, I pulled over a mile later and I checked my odometer twice, because either the road had stopped being a line or I had. I have driven freight for 19 years. Most of it, the long, boring interstate hauls, the ones with truck stops and coffee and other people's headlights. But the run that paid best was the one nobody at the depot wanted. A 600-mile leg between two towns, straight across a stretch of empty high desert with one road through it. No towns in the middle, no stops. One long dark line, there and back. My dispatcher told me the desert leg had been hard to crew for almost a year. Drivers would take it, run it a week or two, and then ask for the interstate work instead, the slow stuff, the stuff with people on it. He said it like it was a joke about men who could not handle quiet. He laughed when he said it. But he looked at the wall behind me while he laughed, not at me. I needed the money, and I had always liked driving alone. So I said I would take the desert leg. He looked relieved in a way I noticed, and then chose not to think about. The job was simple. Load at the east town, drive the 600 miles, unload at the west town. Sleep, reload, drive the 600 miles back. One company rule for that road, printed on the dispatch sheet in capital letters. Do not pick up passengers on the desert leg. I read it, and for a while I followed it. For the first 3 weeks, the run was exactly what I had been promised. Empty. I learned the road the way you learn a long song. I knew the mile markers. I knew the one bend, 60 miles in, where the road leaned and then went straight again for the rest of the desert. I knew the exact shade the sky turned about an hour before dawn. I logged my odometer at both ends every trip. Habit and company rule. East town to west town. 604 miles. Every single trip. There and back, 604, 604. Steady as a clock. The road was as straight as the dispatch made it sound. No turnoffs, no loops, no way to drive in a circle even if you wanted to. Just one line of asphalt laid across 600 miles of dark scrub. By the end of the 3rd week, I could have driven it in my sleep. And there were nights I came close. Then came the 4th week. And the man at mile 200. It was a Monday. Just after midnight. I was about 200 miles into the desert leg, heading west, when my headlights found a man at the side of the road, standing on the shoulder. Tall, thin, a long pale coat, a small bag at his feet. One arm raised, thumb out. An ordinary hitchhiker, in an ordinary pose, in the most extraordinarily empty place a man could possibly be standing. I did not stop. Company rule and good sense. No one walks 200 miles into a desert. There was nowhere he could have come from. I drove past him at speed. In my mirror, his raised arm slowly lowered, and the dark took him. I drove on. 40 minutes, maybe 45. Another 60 miles of dead straight road. And my headlights found a man at the side of the road. The same man. the long pale coat, the small bag at his feet, the same raised arm, the same thumb. Standing on the shoulder of a road I have been driving in one straight line 60 miles further on than a man on foot could possibly have come. I told myself the simple things first. 2 men, 2 hitchhikers in long coats. Brothers maybe, a coincidence of clothing. So I slowed that second time, just enough to look properly as I passed. It was the same man, the same face. And as my headlights swept across him, he turned his head and tracked the cab as it went by. And he smiled at me, the way you smile at someone who is a little late, but who you knew would come. After that night, I started keeping a second log. The official one, the company odometer sheet, the way I was supposed to, and a second one, by hand, on a clipboard wedged beside my seat. In the second one, I wrote down the man, every time I saw him, the mile marker, the time, and the odometer reading at that exact moment. For 4 trips, he was not there, and that was almost a comfort. 604 miles, empty road, no man. I started to feel foolish about the Monday. A tired driver, a trick of the headlights, one hitchhiker imagined twice. On the 5th trip, he was back. Mile 210, heading west. The pale coat, the raised arm, the smile. And then again, 60 miles on. And then again, 60 miles after that. 4 times in one crossing. And here's the thing I made myself write down very clearly. Because writing it clearly was the only thing keeping me steady. Each time I passed him, I logged the odometer. And the gap between sightings on the dial was always 60 miles. But the man never walked 60 miles. He could not have. The truck did the 60 miles. He just waited at the end of each one, already there, as if the road in front of me kept setting him back down. The road was 604 miles long, and I started to understand that the man was not crossing it with me. He was being dealt out along it, 60 miles at a time, like a card the road kept playing into my headlights. My plan was almost stupid in how simple it was. I would not pick him up. I had not picked him up yet, and I would keep not picking him up. But I would prove what he was. On the next crossing he appeared, I would log my odometer at the first sighting, and then I would not slow down and I would not stop. And I would drive the whole rest of the desert leg at one steady speed. And I would write the odometer at every single sighting after that. And the gaps would tell the truth. A witness of a kind. Not a person. There was no person out there but him. The odometer would be my witness. A row of honest numbers. So that whatever the road was doing, it would not only live in the back of my own tired head. It took 3 trips to get a crossing where he showed. The first 2 trips, empty road, no man. As if the road could tell I was waiting and was content to be patient. On the 3rd trip, he was at mile 200. Pale coat, raised arm, smile. I held my speed and I logged the dial. 60 miles on, there again, I logged it. 60 more, there again, I logged it. The gaps held at 60. The numbers behaved. And then, 200 miles from the western town, the road did the thing that broke my plan. My headlights found him early. Not 60 miles on, 30. He had started closing the gap. And he was no longer at the side of the road. He was standing in the middle of my lane. I want to be honest about what happened next. I braked. He was in my lane, and a man in your lane is a man you do not drive through, no matter what your tired head has started to suspect about him. So I braked, and the truck dragged to a stop, and his pale shape stood lit in my headlights, 30 feet off the hood. And then, before I had decided anything, he walked to the passenger door, and he opened it, and he climbed up into my cab, and he sat down, and he pulled the door shut. Up close, he looked like nothing at all. A thin, ordinary man, maybe 60, a tired, pleasant face, a long, pale coat gone grey at the cuffs. He set his small bag on his knees. He looked through the windshield at the dark road, and he said in a mild, friendly voice, "Thank you. It is a long way to go round." I did not drive. I sat with my hands on the wheel, and I asked him how he had got 200 miles into a desert. He smiled, the same unhurried smile, and he said he had not. He said he never went into the desert at all. He said, and his voice stayed mild, stayed kind, "I do not travel the road, friend. I travel the people on it. I get into a cab and I ride a while, and when the driver puts me out, I wait by the road for the same cab to come back around. And it always does. 60 miles, and there I am again." You have been very good about not stopping. Most of them stop on the second night. You lasted 4 weeks. And then he asked me the question I have thought about every night since. He said, "How many times now do you think you have driven me this road? Go on, check your honest little numbers. Add up every 60-mile gap you ever wrote down. And tell me, does it come to 600 miles? Or does it come to something the desert is much too small to hold?" I did not answer him. I drove. I drove the rest of the desert leg with him sitting beside me, mild and patient, watching the road, and at the western town he opened the door and stepped down and lifted his hand in a small wave, and the dark took him. And then I sat in the truck stop at the west town with my clipboard, in the hard white light over a coffee gone cold, and I added up the numbers. Every 60-mile gap I had ever logged. Every sighting going back 4 weeks. I added them all into one running total, the way you add a column of figures you are afraid of. The road was 604 miles long. The gaps came to a number with 5 digits in it. I checked it 3 times. The arithmetic was simple, and it would not change. In 4 weeks of driving a 600-mile road, I had logged the pale-coated man at intervals that added up to more miles than the desert had. More miles than the country had. As if every 60-mile gap I drove had not been 60 miles of getting closer to anything, but 60 miles of going around. Around and around. And the man waiting at the rim of every circle. And then I looked at the other column. The company odometer sheet. East Town to West Town. And every single line on that sheet for 4 straight weeks still said the same thing. 604 miles. 604. As if the truck had been driving an honest straight road the entire time the man had been riding me in circles inside it. I should have quit. I want that on the record. I knew I should have walked into the depot and handed back the desert leg. And instead, I did the worst possible thing. I tried to break the circle. I had it worked out in my head. If the man rode the same cab around and around, 60 miles at a time, then the circle belonged to the cab. So on the next crossing, when he climbed in, I would not put him out at the western town the way I always did. I would keep driving, past the west town, out onto the interstate, onto a real road with real lights and real people. And I would carry him so far off the desert leg that the circle could not close. He climbed in at mile 200, mild and pleasant as ever. He set his bag on his knees, and when I reached the western town and did not slow down, he turned his head and looked at me with something that was almost fondness. I drove off the desert leg. I drove onto the interstate. Lights came up on either side, towns, gas stations, other trucks, the ordinary lit world. And I felt for one whole hour like a man escaping. And then my headlights found a stretch of road with no lights on it. Flat scrub on either side, one straight line of asphalt, and a mile marker at the verge that said 200. I had not turned around. I had not left the interstate. But the interstate had, quietly, somewhere in that lit and ordinary hour, become the desert leg again. And the man beside me said, gently, without looking over, "You see, there is no off the road. There is only the part of the loop where you have not noticed the loop yet." I have made one more crossing. My last one. I need to tell you how it ended. I had stopped trying to escape the loop. You cannot drive out of a circle by going faster. But I had worked out one thing the man had told me himself, back in the cab, when he thought he was only boasting. He had said he traveled the people on the road, not the road. He had said he rode a cab around 60 miles at a time and waited for the same cab to come back. The same cab, the same driver. The loop was not the desert. The loop was me. He was going around and around, a man who kept driving. So on my last crossing, when he climbed into the cab at mile 200, mild and pleasant, his bag on his knees, I drove to the exact center of the desert leg. Mile 302. The furthest point on the road from either town, and I stopped the truck. And I switched off the engine. And I took the key out of the ignition. He looked at me. For the first time since I had ever seen him, the mild smile was gone. I told him the truth. I told him I was not going to drive anymore. Not west, not east, not in a circle. I told him, a man standing still is not a loop. A man standing still is just a man, and there is nothing for him to ride. He sat there a long time in the cooling cab. And then he picked up his small bag and he opened the door. And he stepped down onto the empty road at mile 302 in the dead center of the desert. And he began to walk west, on foot, like an ordinary man with 300 miles in front of him. Because without a driver going round, that is all the road had ever left him. I do not drive freight anymore. I handed the desert leg back to the depot. My dispatcher did not sound surprised. He did not finish his laugh this time. He just wrote it down. So here is what I will leave you with. If you ever drive a long road alone, a straight one, an empty one, and you pass a hitchhiker, and then you pass what looks like the same hitchhiker again, do not slow down to be sure. Because a road is supposed to be a line. And the moment a man can meet you twice on a line, you are not driving a line anymore. You are driving a circle. And he is standing at the edge of it, waiting to be dealt back in. If that ever happens to you, do not try to outrun the loop. You cannot. The loop is not the road. The loop is you still driving. So stop the truck, take out the key, and make him do the last 300 miles the way every other man has to. Sleep well.